it actually turns out that like AI and energy are intertwined topics.
Very intertwined. It's really interesting. One of the reasons why, there are bottlenecks that are moving around. So there's a data bottleneck now. It's going to be followed by an energy bottleneck. It started with a chip bottleneck. Then we went to data bottleneck. Then there'll be an energy bottleneck, probably followed by a cooling bottleneck. And the energy one is probably the toughest because, the grid is already taxed. If we put AI on the power grid, it will not work.
Where I think people in AI are realizing that the energy bottleneck is real and has to be solved. People in energy are realizing that they need to solve it. For the U.S. to be the preeminent technological superpower, economic superpower, military superpower, like we have to solve these twin bottlenecks. We have to win in tech. We have to win in energy.
That doesn't mean dirty energy.
Right.
But you need to let the builders build to a much greater extent than we're allowing right now. And yes, that will bottleneck AI. But I'd say the other thing on these climate change issues, and we spent a lot of time talking with Elon about this, who's a real expert. The right solve is technological. It's not actually policy, but policy can destroy the technological answers. So there's many things that we can do on climate. From Elon's done a great job with battery walls and solar, and then we've seen great progress in both nuclear, safe nuclear fission, safe nuclear fusion, and then with AI helping us design these systems. There's a lot of great new technological ideas for solving these things, and the policy things that say, well, like you can't do new kinds of energy, you can't, you just have to stop using gas stoves, are likely, not only are they very unlikely to work, they actually undermine people trying to build stuff. And I think that's probably the more diabolical thing, or the more dangerous thing, because then we really won't have a solution. Which, by the way, is the story of nuclear, right? Where we probably wouldn't have this problem if we had been allowed to build nuclear.
No, so President Richard Nixon in 1971, the year I was born, declared something he called Project Independence, which was to, and this was this was pre the energy crisis of the 1970s, right? He basically said in 1971, he said we need to get to energy independence for the U.S. We need to do it with nuclear power, and so he basically said we need 1,000 nuclear civilian power plants by the year 2000. We need to go completely electric. It would have involved cutting the entire electric grid of the country, energy production, over to nuclear, zero emission nuclear. It would have involved cutting the entire country over to electric cars. Could have completely turned off fossil fuels with that level of energy generation. It could have and then complete energy security for the country. And like literally, it was a completely possible thing to do. And then he created the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which then spent 40 years preventing that from happening. Right.
Well,
just totally killed it. And the Nuclear Regulatory Commission did not authorize a new nuclear plant developed for over 40 years. And so this has been one of these just incredibly frustrating things to watch and frankly to work on, which is just like you have the silver bullet answer. You know how to do it. The nuclear plants that would get designed and built today would be light years more sophisticated than the ones that are still running from the 1970s. And yet you've been prevented from doing it. And so there's a real opportunity with this administration for a nuclear renaissance that at least we're already investing into, but we would be super excited to invest into.
Yeah,
that's right.
Definitely. And it's the cleanest energy there is. So it could be amazing and very cheap. And France, to their credit, France, is totally clean. They have no energy dependency on anybody. They're not paying Russia nothing. And they're doing it with much, much older technology than we have today.
But chips are another significant AI bottleneck, and also chips are a big strategic issue for the U.S. because of our dependence on Taiwan and our dependence on China. And there has been this in Washington a growing bipartisan awareness over the last 6 to 8 years that it's important to sort of get chip production going in the U.S. again. And then the Biden administration did something that looked like it was very enlightened in this area, which is they passed the CHIPS Act, which is to do $40+ billion worth of funding for chip fabs in the U.S. And our friends at Intel. We're one of the major beneficiaries of that, and Intel, it did commit to a major build out of U.S. chip fab capacity, sort of consistent with what the Biden administration said it wanted and what it would help pay for with the CHIPS Act. And then, I was startled to recently learn, as of today, they have only literally dispersed 0.4% of the CHIPS Act's money to any of these companies. Intel's financial plan assumed $10 billion in money that hasn't shown up.
Oh, that's hard. That's a big hole.
And it's been a process of perpetual renegotiation. If we're going to achieve this important national security industrial policy move, we have to actually let these companies build their stuff, and we have to get the money to them, and we can't just attach every other political hobby horse issue we have to this thing. Basically, the money has not been dispersed because the deal keeps getting renegotiated to add new political requirements. And so you have these companies, both American companies like Intel and also, by the way, overseas companies who committed to invest in the U.S. and to build plants in the U.S. Who have just been basically hung out. There's been this idea that we're going to do this. It has not actually happened yet. And one of the things the new administration has the opportunity to look at, they could take a much more aggressive approach on this.
Or one of the most shocking things is there was a kind of A/B test because Japan also kind of had this deal to their CHIPS Act version, and they're off to the races. They built the fab, and for those of you who are familiar with Japan, they invented bureaucracy. These guys love rules, they love paper, they love checks and balances, they love consensus. They're a collectivist culture in many ways. Yet they were able to do it. So we're way worse than that at this point. Yeah.
And it was a political choice to not do it. It was a political choice to hang it up on all these other issues.
Always.
Yes, exactly. So two more areas to discuss. So defense. So let's touch briefly on what we think is going to happen with we call defense tech.
And so defense tech is there's certainly more complexity there. So if you go and say, okay, well, what are the challenges with defense tech? Well, there's two big ones. One is kind of procurement and the process. And so, one of the things that happened in the U.S., there were all kinds of incidents that caused it, but the rules around what you can procure to basically prevent corruption have gotten basically illogical and wild. So one of them is they purchase via this cost plus model, which basically says, okay, whatever it costs you to build, then we'll pay you 10 or 20% more than that or whatever it is. And the problem with that is, let me just spend as much money as I can building this thing and pay everybody a really fat salary and take our time and have it be long, because there's no penalty for it being 3 years late and the technology sucking. The penalty is for not doing that. And so you have these super high-tech companies with this great technology, and they're we're investing all this in R&D so we can get a higher margin than cost plus, and we'll deliver it much faster, and it will be much better, and it'll be half the price. Well, you still can't do it because of that. So there's kind of those kinds of rules which we've been working on. And then there's another thing that we bump into. We spend a lot of time trying to help our friends in defense and intelligence and so forth. And the budgeting process for them is difficult. They've spent whatever they spent. They have the vendors whoever they have, and so to get new things in is complicated. And so that's something that certainly needs a lot of work. And I think I go back to if you're going through the lens of we have to win, as opposed to we can't take headline risk. We can't be on 60 Minutes with a toilet seat that costs $10,000 or whatever it is that costs all this. Then that's a better place to come from. The best news on this administration by far when it comes to all things tech is that they are open for business and open to the conversation and willing to talk about it. They might not agree with anything we have to say, but we can at least have the conversation. The frustrating thing. And then, by the way, talk to any major tech CEO of the biggest companies in the world, none of them could get meetings with this administration. And the problem with that is the administration didn't have the information that was needed to fix the problem.
This is exactly the time that this needs to happen, because the technological landscape is changing the nature of defense and war very quickly. And so there's absolutely pressing need to do this.
Again, it really is just an orientation. It's do we win first, and then do we worry about let's make things as safe and fair and possible, or do we go, we're going to make things as safe and fair and the way we want them as possible, and if we lose, fine.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think that we've been in the latter world, and I just think it's a very dangerous world for the country.
Yeah, I think that's right. And in fact, I think this would be a great point to end on.
All right. All right. Thank you for listening.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you all for being with us, and you will hear from us more in the future on these topics. But it's been great to be able to go through this, and we are very excited about the near future. It's going to be, I think, a very exciting time.